Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Round the Nation right here, Jeff Waldorf here with you on this Monday afternoon. Hopefully everybody had a good weekend, although some of the news over the weekend was absolutely terrible. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We also have stories about the Brazilian election. Very interesting stuff / scary stuff. So, oh boy. Yeah. So, not the best weekend for a lot of people, especially in Pittsburgh. So, again, we're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to, as I said, Brazil. We also have Fox and Friends, Migrant, Caravan, more fear-mongering about that, and also election fraud, possible election fraud going on here. So, oh boy. Yeah. Okay. So, hopefully everything sounds and looks good. I spent the weekend trying to set up the stream computer, and because I had a hard drive failure, and, man, you know, hopefully everything is working again. So, like I said, it's actually really good because this computer is so much faster than it used to be. So I know I always had a lot of problems with like getting this thing working and running correctly. So yeah. Okay. Anyway, glad everything is working as it should. So again, I've made some other changes behind the scenes and stuff. Hopefully I won't screw any of that up, and we'll have a rather smooth show. But anyway, let's start out with something fun. Then we're going to get a little bit more heavy as we go into the show. So let's go to Donald Trump versus umbrellas. Awesome. Okay. Yeah. It appears as though the President of the United States cannot figure out umbrellas. Now, the President was carrying his own umbrellas. He boarded Air Force One at Andrews Air Force Base on his way to a campaign rally in Indianapolis on Saturday. Now, as you're going to see from the video, Donald Trump, as he reached the door of the plane, he couldn't figure out exactly what to do with the umbrella. I'm going to show you that because it's fun. I love that. The last guy is like, nah, I ain't picking that shit up. Yeah, somebody else is going to have to get it. And somebody else eventually did. Secret Service agent apparently eventually picked this thing up, obviously before they took off. But here's Donald Trump, basically either too lazy to pick it up, or he's like, or to close it and then put it into the plane, and I don't know what his deal is. But Twitter has a few ideas, so let's go to that. A few tweets on this issue. Molly Zhongfast says, quote, umbrellas are hard, the Donald J. Trump story. Lots of fun. P. Chad says, the guy who has access to the nuclear codes cannot close an umbrella. LS 044 says, what's up, smarty pants? Don't know how to close an umbrella? LMAO at Donald Trump. Riot Women says, tip, if you want to try it, if you're going to join a cult, try to find one where the leader knows how to close an umbrella. Which is great. Another tweet related to that. Trump today. When you can't figure it out, just drop it. J.R. McGrail says, you know what? Trump's umbrella deserves its own Twitter account, which, by the way, probably already exists now. Which is great. So, man. So those are fun. Now the responses get a little bit more meta and interesting. John Fugelsang started out by saying, by pointing some similarities, I guess, metaphorically. He said the steps of the campaign, the plane is the presidency, the umbrella is the working class voting base, briefcase guy is GOP Congress delivering that massive tax cut to their donors, and Trump is Trump. Oh, that's good. That's real good. More continuing that same vein, Tech Weenie says, Trump treats his umbrella like the rest of his job. If it requires more than 2 seconds thought, drop it. Now that's interesting because earlier today, Politico came out with another piece talking about Donald Trump's executive time. Turns out he spends 9 hours of his day doing whatever he wants, calling people, tweeting, watching cable news. That's part of his executive time. That's more time than he actually spends working, doing presidency stuff. So majority of his time is calling, tweeting, talking to friends and watching Fox and Friends and watching cable news and getting angry about that. And of course, the rest of his time, other than doing actual work and executive time, is actually spent on the campaign trail. But see, that's what he actually enjoys. That's what he loves doing, because he gets out to go out there and say whatever the fuck he wants in front of a gigantic crowd that loves everything he says. So I don't know if you can really call that work. But anyway, back to the tweets here. Yasmin Mary tweeted in, used it until he didn't need it anymore, so he tossed it. And then, of course, followed by the hashtag, Wake Up America. So true. Because again, Donald Trump's ghostwriter, the one who wrote Art of the Deal, Tony Schwartz, he said basically the same thing. Donald Trump pisses ice water. If he needs you, sure, then you do, he'll be the nicest person to you, favors upon favors, etc. As soon as he doesn't need you, that's it. You're dumped like a ton of bricks. That umbrella, he didn't need it anymore. So he just dumped it. And that's it. Amber Ruffin says, Trump is Trump. The plane is money. The umbrella is our well-being. Maybe I should add the umbrella is the environment that is going to get destroyed or that is getting destroyed by the Trump administration. That's just my little addition to that. Mitten DeMar says, Siri, show me the perfect representation of Trump's ability to handle responsibility. And then finally, of course, Wajahat Ali says, this is a metaphor for what Trump will do to America, i.e. what he actually already is doing to America. Quote, he is reckless and incompetent. He can't even close and protect the umbrella. He'll abandon it, leave someone else to clean it up, and escape in his jet with his rich friends. All this. Again, if there is anything that encapsulates what has been happening for the last 2 years, it is what just happened to this umbrella. We are the umbrella. Oh, dear God. Okay. So let's just move on here. Okay. Okay. Now let's go into more serious / horrible news. All right. Now, following the horrible shooting Saturday at a Pittsburgh synagogue, which left 11 people dead, a Jewish progressive group is now telling the president, hey, you know what? until you can disavow white supremacy, you might as well just stay away from Pittsburgh. Now, according to HuffPost, the leaders of a progressive Jewish organization in Pittsburgh said President Trump should not visit the city as it mourns the 11 people murdered in a mass shooting at a synagogue until he changes his tone. Now, the message comes from leaders of a group called Bend the Arc. They said, quote, President Trump, you are not welcome in Pittsburgh until you fully denounce white nationalism. For the past 3 years, your words and your policies have emboldened a growing white nationalist movement. You yourself called the murderer evil, but yesterday's violence is the direct culmination of your influence. Now, look, what do they mean by that? You might say, okay, look, that's unfair, right? Is Donald Trump a white supremacist? And there are people that will argue no. But look, let's go through and let's kind of break this down, right? Now, for one, during the mass shooting, alleged gunman Robert Bowers reportedly screamed, quote, "Old Jews must die," before he opened fire. So, clear anti-Semitism, right? Some more examples of that. Let's go to his account on Gab. Now, you might not have heard of Gab, but apparently that is the alternate freedom-driven, social media alternative to Twitter, right? Now, one of the rules of Gab is, hey, we're not going to shut you down for saying horrendous things. So naturally, that is a place where horrible people can go to congregate to talk about terrible things, to say terrible things, right? Now, this man was on Gab. Now, when he was there, he started sharing anti-Jewish images, conspiracy theories about Jews controlling the world, criticism of President Trump, interestingly enough, which actually makes the case, could make a possible case of, well, see, the guy wasn't a Trump fan because he was criticizing President Trump for not being tough enough on the Jews. Yikes. His bio on the site said Jews are the children of Satan, and a photo on his profile included the number 1488, that is a reference to Nazism that's very popular among white supremacists. So again, massive anti-Semitism, right? It's pretty clear what this guy believed, and his actions correspond with that horrible belief, right? Now, the group said Trump's rhetoric had not only led to attacks on Jewish people, but also deliberately undermined the safety of people of color, Muslims, LGBTQ people, and people with disability. People with disabilities. And you can just go back to how he mocked a disabled New York Times reporter during the campaign. Now, so here's the thing, right? So is this Donald Trump's fault? I wouldn't say directly, but again, his rhetoric has an effect. And his rhetoric is in line with white supremacists. Now, for example, he calls, undocumented immigrants or immigrants as invaders, right? Goes after black politicians, not just black politicians, but black celebrities as well. For example, Maxine Waters. There's that consistent criticism of people who are African-American that he says are low IQ. Oh, Maxine Waters, low IQ. Don Lemon, he's the dumbest man on television. Omarosa. Now, Omarosa is a very interesting example here because this is somebody that Donald Trump had hired to be in his cabinet. He said she was, quote, vicious, but not very smart. All these prominent African-American, African-Americans that he says are dumb, low IQ, right? Oh, but no, he can't be racist because Kanye. Here we go again, right? Ridiculous defense. From there, not only that, but you also had the original, what he started his campaign on as, well, Mexicans are criminals and rapists. They're not sending their best. Not only that, but there's the stereotype of Mexicans being lazy. But when it comes to Jewish people, well, Donald Trump puts out the tropes and the stereotypes that are anti-Semitic. Now, back as early as 2015, he said things like this, quote, and this is when he was speaking to the Republican Jewish Coalition, right? He said, I'm a negotiator like you folks were negotiators. What does he mean by that? Is there anyone in the room who doesn't negotiate deals? Probably more than any room I've ever spoken. Now, look, if you just said, is there anyone in the room who doesn't negotiate deals? Fine. Okay. Yeah, that's what they do. Probably more than any room I've ever spoken. What does that mean? What does it mean when you say that? Probably more than any room. You mean, what? Yes, they're businessmen. I get that, right? But it goes back to the old trope of Jewish people, for one, being in power and being stingy with their money. And then, of course, he goes into other conspiracies. For example, the globalists. When you talk about globalists, that's basically referring to the conspiracy that Jewish people run the world. Not only that, but during his campaign, he tweeted and later deleted an image that showed Hillary Clinton in front of a pile of money and a Jewish Star of David that said, most corrupt candidate ever. Now, look, I believe Hillary Clinton also was corrupt. But that kind of imagery, that is white supremacist imagery. What does Hillary Clinton have to do with the Star of David? Nothing. Oh, but no, that's a sheriff star. Is it now? Right. So, look, at the very least, he spreads anti-Jewish conspiracies without, of course, naming them. And ironically, he does it while also saying how much he loves Israel, which is kind of interesting as well. But of course, the right-wing position on Israel is actually more predicated on the end times prophecies of fundamentalist Christianity. And of course, look, our defense contractors really love propping up Israel with money and weapons. And that, of course, helps the right-wing government of Israel. So it's a bit complicated here, right? So, like, as far as Israel is concerned, you know, right now we give them a lot of money, and they have a right-wing government that I'm not necessarily in favor of. I'm not fond of that right-wing government. If they had a more left-wing government that was more tolerant, etc., of Palestinians, for example, and went for a two-state solution, but that, of course, gets into foreign policy, which is an aside for this conversation. That said, right, the point is that Bend the Arc is making is, look, Donald Trump's out there attacking people who are not white Christian males. Now, what happens when you stoke that hatred against minorities long enough? Eventually, look, aside from all the horrible attacks that have already gone on against other minority groups, that hatred always eventually leads to anti-Semitism coming front and center. And that's what happens. That's what happened last week. Bombs sent to George Soros. And now you had a deadly shooting at a synagogue. This is not an accident. During Charlottesville, white supremacists were shouting, Jews will not replace us. Now, what did Donald Trump say about that? He said, oh, no. There are good people on both sides. So, look, Trump is spreading these conspiracies without actually, saying that they're against the Jews. And he's trying to walk a fine line because people like Sheldon Adelson give him money. And of course, a lot of the donors love the right-wing position on Israel. But he's also not out there condemning attacks by white supremacists and not calling out white supremacy by name. Now, I remember before the election, you had a lot of right-wingers out there, I think Trump included, saying, but you got to call it what it is when it comes to Islamic terror, right? I forget the exact phrase that they used, but it was, Islamic extremist terror or something like that. Why don't you go out there and why don't you call it what it is? Well, they seem to have a really hard time calling this what it is. That is right-wing domestic terror. And not only that, but anti-Semitism and white supremacy. They seem to have a huge problem coming out and saying that. And I kind of makes you wonder why. But I think in reality, we all know, is because, unfortunately, a lot of those people are part of the Trump base. So, and that goes to the point of he refuses to condemn white supremacy itself, because in the end, it benefits him. And I do think that he believes these racial stereotypes. And, so of course it's like, well, yeah, the Jews run the bank. So of course, that's because they're great negotiators. See, I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm not racist. This is the way they are. It's that old school mentality. And yes, it is racist, even though the guy's not literally wearing a sheet. It is still part of that same white supremacist system. And so I don't think he understands that his supporters get emboldened by this action. Now, look, for the most part, it's words, right? And I'm going to show you that there's a recent study by the Anti-Defamation League, which analyzed millions of tweets and posts on social media. And they found that far-right individuals and groups have actually increased the amount of anti-Semitic posts in the run-up to the midterm elections. They said that more than 80% of the anti-Semitic tweets and hashtags were from conservative or right-wing accounts, and nearly 40% included MAGA or Keep America Great, or KAG. Now, the most, of course, common term was Soros. That's George Soros. That's, again, another conspiracy being spread by the right wing, that George Soros is one of those globalists that are trying to control everything. He's a secret communist, which is funny because he's actually a capitalist. He's a venture capitalist. That's how he made all of his money. All that money that he does give to supposed liberal causes. Now, I don't like that. I actually don't like George Soros's politics, because he is more of your centrist establishment, donor. He gives against progressive causes in some cases, or at least gives to more establishment anti-progressive candidates on the Democratic side. But at the same time, all the, conspiracy theories surrounding him, that he's a secret communist and all that stuff, come on, man. Absolutely ridiculous. There's no proof of any of that. Now, if you're sick of him giving to Democratic candidates, I hear you. I don't want him to give to Democratic candidates. But you know what? I also don't want him giving money to anybody. And I also don't want the Koch brothers giving to Republican candidates. I don't want Sheldon Adelson giving to any candidates. I want all that money, all that big big donor and big corporate money. I want that out of politics, because I believe that corrupts the process. So yeah, get all the money out. Get all the money out, and that's it. But back to Soros, right? Now, Soros, not barely a week since he was mailed a bomb, Republicans are still running ads against Soros. And look, they don't care that it's their rhetoric that is making the situation worse, that is actually ramping up attacks on Jewish people, right? And not only Jewish people, but also minorities as well. Now, Donald Trump is a symptom of the issue, right? He's not the sole creator of all this hatred and, all this division, right? He's more capitalizing on it. Again, symptom, right? Much symptom of a larger issue. But at the same time, he's certainly doing nothing to take on the disease. And in fact, in doing what he's doing, or what he's not doing, making it worse. And that's the reality. Okay. All right. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take a quick break here. We'll come back. We got more stuff, including the Brazilian elections and much more. So stay right here. I'll read your super chats when I get back from the break. So send those in and stay right here around the nation. Everybody, welcome back to the show. Around the Nation, right here. Jeff Waldorf with you. Got a super chat here from Jonathan Scott. He asked, so, how long before Trump pardoned Cesar Sayak? Cesar Sayak, of course, was the pipe bomber that was recently caught. Very, very pro-Trump. Interesting. Good question there, Jonathan. Don't know the answer to that, unfortunately. Okay, anyway. So let's dive into more stories here. Let's go to Brazil. Okay. So recently there was an election in Brazil where a far-right candidate has unfortunately won. Now, Western reaction to this is very interesting. It turns out that, according to The Intercept, corporate interests and the business press are super, super excited about what could be a fascist presidency. Great. Now, they apparently are incredibly happy about his positions on markets, foreign investment, not only that, but cutting corporate taxes and privatizing public services. In fact, Owen Jones of The Guardian writes, big business sees a victory of Brazilian fascism as a massive investment opportunity. Now, if that doesn't kind of speak to the ills of corporate media, I don't know what does, man. Now, the CBC, let me go back here to the CBC. That's Canada. So, you would think the Canadian take on this would be, largely dismissive. I should say dismissive of fascism, right? But, according to The Intercept, while highlighting Bolsonaro's, by the way, that is a new president, Jair Bolsonaro. Hopefully I said that right. I probably said it wrong. While highlighting his homophobic, racist, and misogynist statement, the CBC gushed that his win over Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad could mean, quote, fresh opportunities for Canadian companies looking to invest in the resource-rich country thanks to his strong commitment to open markets. Oh, great. Wonderful. Hey, look, Brazil just elected a fascist, but you know what's great? Markets. For Christ's sakes, man. Wow. Now, there's more. Ana Prusa, a former U.S. State Department official who researches Brazil for the Wilson Center, which is a Washington, D.C.-based firm, said, quote, it could be a good time to be a mining investor in Brazil. Hey, look, mining investment. Great. Let's now invest in Brazil, despite, again, Brazilians electing a fascist. Now, I'm going to go into why I'm saying he's a fascist and going into some of his terrible remarks. CBC mentioned that he made homophobic, racist, and misogynistic statements. I'll go into those because those are really, really crazy. But first, there's more. As The Intercept reported last week, American business elites were positively giddy at the prospect of a Bolsonaro victory, which one executive said could be a, quote, bullish opportunity for us. Yay. Enthused by Bolsonaro's selection of right-wing University of Chicago-trained financier Paulo Guedes to craft his economic agenda, investors are, quote, more than happy to overlook the authoritarian impulses and violent promises. The Intercept's Lee Fong and Zujilani had wrote. Guedes has promised to sell off state assets, cut public pensions, revise the tax code, and deregulate the economy. Another Bolsonaro advisor, Naban Garcia, told Reuters that the administration would slash fines for farmers who violate environmental rules in sensitive areas like the Amazon. So now, of course, we're putting the Amazon rainforest in peril. But hey, you know what? Wall Street firms and American corporations, they're going to be able to go in and make some money off Brazil. Yay. In fact, as soon as Bolsonaro won the first round of election, which, by the way, is against 13 other people, corporations couldn't contain themselves. CNBC had reported that Brazil stocks outshined the rest of the world ahead of Sunday's election. And following, of course, Bolsonaro's 10-point victory, stocks continued to skyrocket as investors cheered. Now, Bolsonaro, look, he again, they mentioned that he had won by 10 points. He was against another guy, somebody who was not a very well-known social democrat. The person that he was originally going to go up with went down on some mysterious corruption charges. Weird. So there's a lot of questions going on. The man, I believe Lula, last name, blanking on the first name as usual, terrible with names. He actually was the person that was most likely to win the election. And, oh, look at that. He got removed and arrested for corruption charges by right-wing courts. And the person that they got to replace him, Haddad, just wasn't popular enough, did not have enough time to get his name out there. And so now Brazil has a fascist. Lovely. And again, you keep wondering, why do I keep calling him a fascist? Why do you call him a fascist, Jeff? What has he done that's fascistic? Well, apparently, he had said that he would be giving carte blanche for the police to kill people. That's not the only thing. Jair Bolsonaro, according to Bloomberg, on Monday said, he said the word that Bolsonaro said the words investors really wanted to hear. Brazil's next president pledged to trim the deficit, pay down debts, and reduce the size of government after results showed him cruising to victory over Fernando Haddad of the left-wing Workers' Party. And of course, now let's get to the stuff that he's actually said. In 1993, he said, quote, "I am in favor of a dictatorship, a regime of exception." Well, there he is. I'm in favor of a dictatorship, a military dictatorship. In 99, he also said, "I'm in favor of torture. You know that, and the people are in favor as well." Boy, that starts to remind you of somebody that we have in power here in the United States that says similar things. There's more. In 2002, this is for LGBT rights, "I will not fight nor discriminate, but if I see two men kissing in the streets, I'll hit them." Another one on LGBT rights. "I would be incapable of loving a homosexual child. I'm going to act like a hypocrite here. I'd rather have my son die in an accident than show up with some mustachioed guy. For me, he would have died." And adds, "If your son starts acting a little gay, hit him with some leather, and he'll change his behavior." There's more. Okay, look, that's older stuff, right? And he might be like, look, maybe the guy's changed, right? Maybe he's not so extreme now, and maybe that's why he won the election. Maybe he moderated. No. In 2016, he said of gender equality, quote, "I would not employ a woman with the same salary of a man, but there are many women who are competent." I mean, women, competent, but I'm not going to pay him the same as a man. That's ridiculous. Why would I ever do that? There's more. And this is last year at an event. Quote, "Beyond Brazil, above all, since we are a Christian country, God above everyone. It is not this little story of secular state. It is a Christian state. And if a minority is against it, then move. Let's make a Brazil for the majorities. Minorities have to bow to the majorities. The law must exist to defend the majorities. Minorities must fit in or simply disappear." Basically sending the message, assimilate or else. Minorities must disappear. I mean, look, here in America, it's supposed to be, we protect the minority against the tyranny of the majority, which I guess in a lot of cases has been perverted. For example, the majority want background checks on, weapons, guns. Majority want healthcare, and we don't get any of that. But when it comes to the hateful stuff or the stuff that benefits corporations, well, then suddenly the majority opinion, at least in Brazil, is respected. Great. Now, not only that, there's more. He said, violence is combated with violence. Not good. He also had, during a live video address in a rally in Sao Paulo, this is on October 21st of this year. He said, you will not have any more NGOs to quench your leftist hunger. It will be a cleansing never before seen in the history of Brazil. Ooh, okay. That same address, he also said, you will see a proud armed forces which will be collaborating with the future of Brazil. You, Patrolhada, that's a derogatory term for the Workers' Party supporters, will see a civilian and military police with a judicial rear guard to enforce the law on your backs. In case he wasn't clear about the cleansing, we will enforce the law on your backs. We'll step all over you. That's what he's saying. Hey, leftists, we're going to step all over you. I'm the new president of Brazil. What are you going to do? That's scary, man. So this is the guy whom the media like the CBC and the Wall Street Journal, as well as our corporations, are being super friendly with. Yeah, I know the CBC pointed out, well, I mean, he said a whole bunch of problematic tweets, but this could be an investment opportunity. You know, this is all so they can open up the markets, so they can access Brazilian resources, right? Which they cannot wait to exploit. I mean, who cares about women, LGBT, workers' rights? No, guys, there's money to be made. Money to be made. And here we have North American media basically trying to paint the bright side of fascism to their readers. Hey, at least we'll have open markets. Great. You know, there is no bright side to fascism. Again, if you voted for this guy and if you think that money is going to go to you, no, it's not. It's going to go to gigantic multinational corporations because that's who fascism serves. But here's the thing, right? Poor economic conditions, which were happening in Brazil. They were in the middle of one of their biggest recessions, right? Now, that ends up leading to fascism, and that's what we see here. Their response to this is, okay, well, let's elect the guy who says we're going to fix everything. And again, along with fascism comes blaming minorities and ironically using Christianity, which, if you read the Bible at all, actually condemns material wealth to amass power. This is not a populist movement. So whenever you see media here, establishment media saying, oh, he's a far-right populist. No. You have to understand something. Populism is not right-wing. There is no such thing as right-wing populism. It is fascism. And here we have our media corporations aiding and abetting its rise. It is absolutely grotesque what is happening. There is fascism arising all over the world. And Brazil is just the latest example. If you think it can happen, again, it can and it has. It is a very scary time. Okay. All right. Moving on. That's the wrong one. Weird. Sometimes my sidebars are getting a little wonky today. All right. Let's move on here. Now, Fox and Friends continues to fear-monger about the migrant caravan that is slowly making its way across Mexico. Now, host Brian Kilmeade warned viewers on Monday saying that the country can't have, quote, entire populations of refugees seeking asylum come in and bring disease into this country. I'm going to show you that video. So take a look, guys.
What about diseases? I mean, there's a reason why you can't bring a kid to school unless he's inoculated. You know, there's things that happen in this country. We already give 40 to 50% of our taxable income to the government for social programs. Is it too much to say that we just can't have countries, entire populations come in here without being looked at as hard-hearted? To me, it's a practical way of having a nation that everyone looks up to and wants to be a part of. That's part of the reason why America's America. There's a process.
There's a process. Yeah, there is a process. It's called asylum. Asylum is legal, dipshit. Seriously. That is one thing that the right never seems to understand about these caravans, about these people coming in, is that the majority of these people are asylum seekers. They go to the nearest port in America, turn themselves in so that they can seek asylum, which is 100% legal. They're not undocumented immigrants sneaking across the border. There are people looking for asylum. They don't get it, man. But look, there's a lot of BS in that, so I'm going to break that down. So first off, he says, oh, entire populations of people are coming over. Look, the caravan itself is 4,000 people. That is not the entire population of a country. Now, maybe he's thinking and got confused of the eventual effects of climate change. Well, actually, that actually will, at its worst projections, cause entire populations of people to have to leave the area of which they live because it's no longer habitable. You can no longer grow food in those areas, right? And have to go to other areas. I mean, look, Brian Kilmeade is not exactly the brightest guy, so maybe he did get confused. But that's not what it means, right? But here's the thing, right? The question itself that he asked about being hard-hearted if he doesn't want entire populations of people coming in, it's a rhetorical trap. Because, again, I just pointed out why that's incredibly incorrect. No, the reason that these people are coming to America, by the way, is not because America's, like, inherently special. I mean, look, I think we're, like, 23rd or something in education, 27th or 30th in healthcare. We're not exactly doing fantastic, right? So it's not because we're special, right? And this is coming from somebody, look, I love my country. I'm a patriot, and I want this country to do better. That's why you can point out the faults and say, hey, you know what, America, we can actually do better. We can actually do these things that some of the other places in the world do that increase happiness of the citizens. But that's not what I'm saying, right? The reason that these people are coming to America is because they're fleeing from literal death and extreme poverty. And who knows, some of the people that might come into America might go through America and go to Canada. There is that possibility as well. Or some actually might stay in Mexico as well. Because they've actually been, Mexicans have been far more welcoming to these Guatemalan, Honduran, and El Salvadoran refugees than a lot of Americans are, right? But anyway, as I said before, Republicans not in favor of this. In fact, Dan Bongino, who's a host of NRA TV, he basically comes on and he's going to have to double down on all the fear-mongering. Watch.
Brian, if this is allowed to continue, the caravan into the United States, then the border is meaningless. And I mean that. I mean, what's the point of a border? If we can't stop individual narco traffickers and human trafficking across our border when they come in small groups, and we can't stop them in large groups, then I'm asking a reasonable question. What's the point of the border? Yeah. You can't stop small groups. You can't stop large groups. What's the point? And what's fascinating here is whenever it comes to the topic of illegal immigration, do you ever notice it's only discussed by the left in terms of its effect on the people crossing the border illegally. It's almost never discussed on the effect illegal immigration has on border towns, border communities, the taxpayers in the United States in general. It's like our concerns are ignored, and we're only supposed to pay attention to the concerns of the people in the caravan, which is entirely irrational.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dan. People aren't paying enough attention to your needs. Dan Margino, I don't know if you know this. I think he's actually incredibly wealthy. Just saying. But look, the point that I bring that up is look, this point is based on fallacy, right? So he's talking about, oh, we don't have a border because we're letting everybody in. Here's the thing. Asylum seeking is 100% legal. But at the end there, again, you notice that he went into white supremacist talking points. He said our concerns are completely ignored. I mean, look, we're being completely ignored as the American people, our concerns, poverty, etc. Okay, well, here's the thing, right? Immigrants have actually helped the economy. They're actually good for a country. They actually commit less crime than native-born Americans. And I believe it was second-generation immigrants start more businesses than anyone else, than native-born. So, hey, they're entrepreneurs, and they're incredibly hard workers, and they contribute to the economy. And they don't get federal welfare benefits. Immigration is actually fairly good for the country. Now, you do want to have a process, going back to kill meat, of course. But right now, our process is incredibly messed up. Waiting lists in the tens of 20s of years, right? So there's a lot of issues with our immigration system. If only we could actually fix that. Oh, right. None of the parties in charge are really ever interested in fixing these issues. But again, that's a different conversation, right? But to address the point here, right, of, oh, they just want to worry about illegal immigrants, which, by the way, asylum seekers, not illegal. It's 100% legal to seek asylum. Conservatives don't want to do things that help regular Americans. So while they're bitching about, oh, we're going to do everything for the illegals instead of helping our own people, conservatives are in charge. They could easily do programs that could help the American people. But they don't. Their whole economic plan is tax cuts for the rich, which means less government services for you. And, of course, deregulation, which benefits corporations and hurts the environment in your area. That's your river they're dumping coal ash into. And that's your air that they're polluting, which leads to more, of course, health problems down the road. Increases in things like asthma and lung cancer from all those pollutants being released into the air. That's a Republican plan. They don't care about you. They don't care. But of course, they're saying, oh, well, we need to cut these government services because they're being used by undocumented immigrants. Well, again, undocumented immigrants and asylum seekers don't get federal benefits. Now, there are some states out there, for example, California will give you a driver's license and might actually help with education and healthcare. But that's a state benefit. That's not the federal benefit. That's not the federal government giving that money. That is the people in California who've decided, hey, you know what? We're actually going to help these people be able to get, into, like, for example, pay some taxes and be able to get jobs and healthcare and things like that actually help society. We're going to help with that. We've made that choice as a state. But the country has not made that choice. So overall, no, undocumented immigrants do not get federal welfare benefits. Now, again, this is the argument that if you can't help American citizens, then you shouldn't help people who are undocumented, right? Undocumented immigrants, and by extension, asylum seekers, right? Now, conservatives purposely don't help Americans so that immigrants are not welcome. So that they can say, well, look, we can't help these guys, but we can't help those guys. So we can't help anybody. When in reality, again, their policy proposals are geared towards not helping Americans, but actually helping wealthy Americans. And by the way, look, people are wrong if they're saying conservatives hate alt immigrants. That's not exactly true. They love wealthy immigrants, especially wealthy white immigrants. So let's be honest about that. Okay. Anyway, that is the reality of the conservative position. And this is, again, Fox News propaganda that you're going to see. It's the type of propaganda that you're going to see all the way till Election Day, because guess what? It plays really, really well with an audience that is easily scared. And unfortunately, that's what's going on. And that's why they continue to fearmonger about this entire caravan. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. Not mess with that. I'm going to take a quick break. We'll come back. We got one more segment here. So, send your super chats if you haven't already. And I'll read them after the break. So stay right here. We'll come right back. Hey everybody, we're back. Around the Nation. Jeff Waldorf here. All right, let's see if there are any super chats. Nope. Okay, sad. That, by the way, goes to help the show. Helps keep us on the air. Independent, progressive media and all that stuff. Especially since we do have a lot of demonetization and algorithm issues that do prevent a lot of the video clips from getting out there into the suggested feed. So, super chat definitely helps. Also Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation. Okay. Let's get to the story here. Last one of the day, and it is a doozy. Electoral fuckery. All right. So there may be some electoral fuckery afoot in Texas. Apparently several Texas organizations have received reports of voting machines switching votes in the high-profile Senate race between Ted Cruz and candidate Beto O'Rourke. Now, I'm not quite sure which way it goes. Is it going from Beto O'Rourke to Ted Cruz or Ted Cruz to Beto O'Rourke? Either way, that is a big, big problem because there are people that are getting disenfranchised, people that are voting for a certain candidate that is not getting their vote counted. and it's not going to the right candidate. Now, the Houston Chronicle reported that multiple voters have documented incidents during early voting where they have used a straight ticket option, of course. Straight ticket, of course, is where the machine is supposed to automatically choose the designated candidate for one party. Say you choose Republican Party, it chooses all the Republican candidates. Democratic Party does the same thing. Only to discover that the voting machine has selected the Senate candidate for the opposing party. So you do a straight ticket Republican, it chooses Beto. You do a straight ticket Democrat, it chooses, in some circumstances, Ted Cruz. Disastrous, right? Now, apparently people have complained. 15 to 20 people have reported the issue to the state, while a spokesperson for the Texas Civil Rights Project says they've received about a half a dozen complaints. Not a lot, but nonetheless, every vote should count. Every vote should be sacred, right? Now, of the side that's complaining the most, it seems to be mostly Democratic straight ticket voters whose ballots erroneously included a vote for Ted Cruz, and one Republican straight ticket voter whose ballot tabulated a vote for O'Rourke. So it is disproportionately affecting Democratic voters. Now, the malfunctioning is happening on Heart E-Slate machines. That's an electronic voting machine used in 82 of Texas's 254 counties. Now, this isn't the first time that those specific machines had an issue. Now, apparently the Secretary of State's office is saying, oh, it's not a machine error, it's user error. Operator error. Problem exists between keyboard and chair. Or in this place, voting machine and chair. So, look, I don't know. They say that it's caused by people not slowing down to double and triple check their ballots. Well, always do that, of course, just to make sure. But, look, I don't know. This is just more evidence that these voting machines are not, like, they're not trustworthy. I mean, look, they've got to get rid of these machines, and here's why, okay? Because there's nothing that frustrates me more than machines that don't work. Like, again, if you've been watching the time where my hard drive was failing, you would know. I get incredibly frustrated. But of these machines who tabulate incorrect votes, and again, they tabulate it incorrectly for Republicans, that's terrible. They tabulate it incorrectly for Democrats, that's also terrible, right? We actually need to fix this issue. Now, and we can fix this issue by actually going to something different. I would say hand-counted paper ballots. That would be my solution to this. But anyway, to point out how problematic these machines are, and to show why we should get rid of these, I'm going to go to an article written in the New York Times by Kim Zetter. Now, in it, she asked, how did our election system get so vulnerable? And why haven't officials tried harder to fix it? So, again, our systems are vulnerable. A lot of these places are using outdated software and outdated machines, things like that. Hey, you know what you never have to update? Paper ballots. Just saying. But she asks, or she answers the question, and she says, it comes down to money, to politics and money. She said the voting machines are made by well-connected private companies that wield immense control over their own proprietary software, often fighting vigorously in court to prevent anyone from examining it when things go awry. So one big problem with that, aside from the many other obvious problems, is here you have a company that is incentivized to protect its own proprietary software. So that's got big problems when it comes to something like elections. So if there's ever an issue with the election machines, people are unable to go in and look at what the problem is and then to go and fix the problem. And of course, for the company, on the company, it's like, why do I want to fix the problem and do updates when that's going to cost me money? I don't want to do that. Let's just sweep it under the rug. And there are a lot of politicians out there, especially the ones that win, and that might have won due to some of these technical errors, to sweep it under the rug. Well, I mean, the machine says I win, so I guess I win. Anyway, she did cite an example in Ohio 2004 when John Kerry lost the presidential race following numerous election irregularities. Kerry's team was denied access to the voting machine software. Now, in an interview with WNYC's Brian Lear, Kerry had said, quote, "We were told by the court that you were not able to get that algorithm to check it because it was proprietary information. That belonged to a giant corporation. There was nothing I could do. I couldn't look the votes to see if there was something that messed it up or if somebody hacked into the election results. I couldn't see if I actually really legitimately lost." That's a huge problem. Not only that, but Zeller also writes many of the products they make have documented vulnerabilities and can be subverted in multiple ways. Hackers, for example, can access voting machines via the cellular modems used to transmit unofficial results at the end of the election, or subvert back-end election management systems used to program the voting machines and tally votes, and spread malicious code to voting machines through them. Another thing that we might have also seen during that we could see during 2018 is eliminating or messing with voter registration databases. That is also a possible problem. Attackers also, Zeller writes, could design their code to bypass pre-election testing and kick in only at the end of an election or under specific conditions. Say, when a certain candidate appears to be losing, and erase itself afterward to avoid detection. Now, there was a weird instance of that possibly happening in Kansas. Chris Kobach. There was a weird glitch when he was behind, and suddenly Kobach is ahead. Now, his Republican candidate refused to have them look into this, even though he could have lost. He could have had this election stolen from him by Kobach. He said, "Oh, no. Don't look into it. Whatever you do, I trust the results." And it's wise, because this ridiculous insistence that that the result must be 100%, that's the 100% result, and we cannot fault it at all. When these machines are incredibly vulnerable to having their results changed, for people being able to come into and change these results. I don't know, maybe they're afraid of like, oh no, but if we do that, then nobody's going to trust any election result ever. Well, look, we have to challenge when we use these machines and when we see things that don't add up. Now, attackers, as I said before, could also make the machines produce election results with wide margins to avoid triggering automatic manual recounts in states that require them when results are close. Well, now, that's also incredibly disastrous. Now, am I saying this is happening in Texas? Not necessarily. But I also can't say that it's not happening. There's too much of a cloud over the use of, or over elections that use these types of voting machines. And I've seen too many instances of things that just didn't seem right. And there's no way that you could go back and actually verify the votes. So, look, I've seen these clouds, and I do kind of understand now a little bit more, even though I disagree with that, where people say, well, why vote then? My vote's not going to matter. It could be changed through one of these machines. Look, I get it, right? I get it. And here's the thing. Staying home and not voting actually makes it easier for them to manipulate results. Because think about it this way. In situations where the vote is closer, those who perpetrate election fraud can actually get away with it. Change 1 or 2 votes here and there, and, 10,000 or wherever. Like, think of a small number of votes in especially state elections where it's much easier to be able to change a small amount of votes and win the election. That is a possibility. And so maybe those 1 or 2 votes from the people who stayed home might have counted against that electoral fraud. So in that situation, I say vote. Please vote. And look, not even that. It doesn't have to necessarily be electoral fraud. And in this case, I'm not sure. with Ted Cruz and Beto, since it seems to be going both ways. But I think this is an important discussion to have. But not just, again, electoral fraud. There's also voter suppression, right? Now, voter suppression is happening in both Texas and Georgia. And it's been happening in a lot of the former Title V of the Voting Rights Act states. Now, Title V, of course, was basically where places that had engaged in voter suppression before were watched by the federal government. The Supreme Court took that away and said, oh, we don't need it anymore. Nobody's going to suppress the votes. And then here we go. We have these same states now suppressing the vote. So not only do we have voter disenfranchisement, but we also have possible election fraud. The only thing that doesn't seem to be happening is widespread voter fraud. Which is the one thing, unfortunately, one of the major parties seems to be focused on when it comes to election and electoral integrity. But if you are actually worried about what's actually going on, what's really going on, then you would be worried about attempts to hack into the elections, whether foreign or domestic, these voting machines with their proprietary software, and all the other issues that we've discussed in this video. Strange how they're not seem to be worried about that. Makes you wonder why. Okay. So that's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thanks for tuning in around the nation. Please give us a like and share. Please consider going to our Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, and signing up to support independent progressive media. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Same time, same place, 3 p.m. Eastern, right here around the nation. And have a great afternoon. We'll see you guys tomorrow. And remember, change begins with you.